Assalamualaikum and hi. So for this week offline class, I am going to explain a few things on loan instruments. Basically the subtopic which I purposely skip in class. So that I could explain it to you via this recording. And most of the topic that I skip during the class are basically theoretical. Basically those which are theoretical. So let me introduce you the loan instrument. We do some recap on the topic. So basically loan instruments, why does certain company choose to issue loan instruments instead of equity instruments? These are the reason among others. The first one would be because it is cheaper. Cheaper in the sense of the publication, the process, the administration, etc., etc. And then what would the lender of these loan instruments get in return? They will basically get a return in the form of interest. The company will pay them interest. And the issuance are usually made or practiced by public company. Some of the examples are debentures, bonds, convertible loan stock, and redeemable preference shares. So you have heard these items in the class before. Okay, so we move to the next slide. All right, these are a few of the differences. I categorize the differences according to types, return form and presentation, and few more, on the next slide. So basically, the types, the differences in terms of types, we have equity instrument. This one we did in chapter 2, where basically we focus on the ordinary share capital and preference share capital. As for liability instruments, we are covering this topic, starting from previous week. All right, and we have some of the liability instruments such as debentures, redeemable preference shares, and loan stock, as well as convertible loan stock, bonds, etc. All right, in terms of the return, the difference in terms of return for equity instruments, basically the shareholders, we call the public who subscribe the shares of the companies as shareholders, and basically the shareholders would eventually would receive return in the form of dividend. As for liability, the lenders or the creditors would receive a return in the form of interest. And in terms of presentation, equity instruments is reported under issued and paid up capital in the soft P. And for liability, it is recorded under non-current liabilities in the soft P. So both are recorded in the statement of financial position, but under different header, different category of accounts, right? In terms of journal entry, so basically, when we did chapter 2 on the equity instruments, we record, we do the journal entry recording for the issuance, for the dividend declare and payment, for the buyback as well as the transaction costs, example brokerage fees, and for liability instruments, we prepare the journal entry to show the record of issuance of the liability instruments, the interest paid, and the interest charge, as well as the redemption of liability and the transaction costs. So both of the instruments have quite similar of transactions that need to be recorded in the form of journal entries. So both involve issuance, both of the instruments involve issuance, and then involve some of the return, dividend for equity, interest for liability. Okay, buyback is when the company purchase, okay, its own shares from the open market. Okay, and redemption is basically repayment. Okay, repayment of the liability. Okay, and both have transaction costs. Okay, only under a different terms, right? Okay, so the methods involved, okay, under equity instrument basically are for the buyback, where we only have two methods, okay, for the buyback. The purchase of the company's own shares, okay, is either the company purchase and retain its share as treasury, okay, or the company buy back its share for cancellation. Okay, so there are two methods for the buyback. As for liability instrument, okay, the methods involved, okay, starting from the issuance itself, okay, starting from the issuance itself, where we need to identify, okay, either the company used amortize, or either the company apply the fair value through P&L method. Okay, because the issuance of the liability instruments, okay, as well as the interest expense and interest charge, okay, will basically rely upon the method used or practice. Okay, and for the redemption, okay, there are three methods available, or three ways available for the redemption of redeemable preference shares. Okay, only for redeemable preference shares, okay, this practice are available, okay, where the companies can either redeem its redeemable preference shares and then issue a new share to replace the amount of redeemable preference shares redeemed, okay, or the company can uh, take out, okay, some amount out of the profit, okay, or just basically uh, take out some amount from its capital. Okay, this is under redemption of redeemable preference shares. Okay, all right. So basically, when we do all the recordings, okay, for issuance, for the dividend or the interest, as well as the buyback or the redemption, okay, basically, we must be careful on determining the accounts, okay, involved in each transaction, okay, whether it is assets, basically bank, okay, usually when issuance of shares, okay, it will involve bank accounts, okay, so similar to issuance of debentures, where the company would receive, okay, um, certain amount of money, okay, from the issuance of shares and the debentures. So the bank would increase, and bank is assets, okay. And then if the company issue liability instruments, then its liability will increase, okay. If the company issue share capital, okay, so the company's equities will increase, okay. So now, okay, bank increase under the assets, okay, the liability will increase if the company issue liability instruments, okay, and the company will also increase its equities if the company issue share capital, okay. So basically, the accounting equation rules, okay, uh, intact, okay, it follows the accounting equation, okay, no such thing as the account would not be balanced, etc., and etc. Okay, so you must be able, when we do the recording of the journal entries, okay, we must be able to identify, okay, which type of accounts, okay, involved in such transaction, so that we would have a balanced statement of financial position, okay, after adjusting for the journal entries, okay, for each transaction. All right. Okay. So basically, okay, other than what I have mentioned earlier in my previous slide, okay, so the conclusion is, okay, the difference between equity instruments and loan instruments can be summarized as follows. Okay, we have a not fixed, meaning that the return, okay, return on equity is not fixed, fluctuate, okay, a fluctuate return on equity, okay, except for preference share, okay, except for preference share. So the return on equity is basically not fixed, okay, not even fluctuate, okay, it means, I mean, it depends on the company's profit, okay, the company's performance, okay. However, okay, for loan instrument, the return on debentures specifically, as well as redeemable preference share, loan stock, okay, and any other loan instrument, is fixed and paid at a specified time, okay, regardless whether the company makes profit or not, okay. For the equity, the payment is not compulsory, okay, but not for loan instrument. It is compulsory, okay, whether the company makes profit or not, okay. Number two, if you look at the frequency, okay, it depends on the company's dividend policy, okay. So this is in contrast with the return on loan instruments, okay, where the return is made at a specific time, so maybe once a year or twice a year, okay, depends on the company's policy as well, okay. Number three, dividends are profit appropriation, and as such, it is shown in the statement of changes in equity. Okay, but for interest, it is interest paid are expenses, so it appear in the statement of profit or loss. Okay, under finance costs. Okay, and the shareholders have voting rights. Okay, because they are the risk takers. But for debentures, they are the creditors, and as such, they do not have any voting right. Okay, however, they have the priority, okay, to claim over the shareholders, okay, on the assets, okay, in the case of the company being wound up. Okay, if let's say the company goes bankrupt, okay, so the debentures have the priority claim over the assets of the company compared to shareholders. Okay, and then debenture holders have trustees appointed to protect their interests. Okay, shareholders have no one being appointed, okay, to protect their interests. Okay, as and so the rights and responsibilities of the trustees are written in a trust deed. Okay, the last one, okay, debentures can be secured to assets of the company. The charge is either fixed or floating. Okay, compared to equity instruments, it cannot be secured to assets of the company. Okay, so basically these are the differences, okay, between equity instruments and loan instruments. And the famous criteria or the famous attribute, okay, the famous item, okay, the famous difference, okay, is basically on the return, okay, because return on equity instrument is not fixed, okay, unless for preference share, but for loan instrument it is totally fixed, okay, and debenture holders have no voting right, okay, compared to shareholders. Shareholders basically have the voting rights, okay, but debenture holders have the priority to claim the assets of the company, okay, in case of the company goes bankrupt, okay, but not shareholders, okay, and then the return, okay, the return for loan instrument is basically known as interest, okay, but for equity it is known as dividend, okay, dividend. So those are the famous comparison or the famous differences, okay, between these two instruments. So that's all for today, okay. This is all I would like to share, okay, for this week, right? So hopefully you have the idea, okay, on the differences between equity and loan instruments, okay, and whenever there are any questions on the differences, okay, I hope you manage to provide the correct answers, okay. So that's all, and I see you in the next offline screen sharing if possible, okay. For now, thank you and have a nice day. Assalamu alaikum.